Hi, my name is Blake, and welcome to the Highway Tag Africa course. This particular section is about the importance of zooming in and zooming out when you're trying to map roads. So as you can see, I'm sort of zoomed in here and I'm getting ready to map some roads. And the thing that I want you to understand is that there's almost nothing I can map from this view. If you reviewed the Highway Tagging Africa wiki page, you will have noticed that they very much emphasize how the roads are used and what the purpose of the roads are, much more than detailed view of the roads. So with this, I can definitely see that there's a road here and there's a road here, and this is a small road. You can see the tracks. This down here, this is probably a path. So this is what you can garner. You can sort of distinguish between a path and a road, which we'll talk about later. But you can sort of distinguish between a path and a road by zooming in, but not too much else. If I were going to map any of these roads, I could certainly draw them in, but there would be no way for me to tag them from this view. So really, your most effective view for mapping roads is going to be something that is pretty zoomed out. And really, depending on which roads you're tagging, this is not even zoomed out too far, because I can definitely see that this road here is a pretty significant road, and it's leading from one significant town to another significant town. And then I can see that a road goes off to the south here that also goes to another significant town. And this is really the sort of information I need to properly tag some of these larger roads. But even if I zoom in a little bit, now I can start to determine what these roads are actually doing. So it's really, now I can start to see this road, this doesn't go very far. Well, maybe this goes up here. But certainly if I come over here and I zoom in a little bit, I can see, this is going to other small villages and hamlets. So this road is probably unclassified. I would probably tag this road as unclassified. It's not really going from major city to major city. It's just sort of connecting small villages. So you really need to sort of zoom out when you're doing this tagging. Now this is obviously a much more major road going to much larger settlements. So this road you're probably looking at, this is probably going to be a secondary road. I would probably tag this one as secondary. And then if we zoom in a little bit more, this road here looks like probably, again, it's going to some small settlements here. If you can see the road, I'm zoomed out a fair amount here. If you can see the road from here, it's a road. It's a highway. So you're not going to have to worry about whether it's a path or not. Generally, once you're zoomed out, it's very difficult to see paths. If you zoom in, you can start to see paths. So if I zoom in a little bit here, this looks like a path to me. It's very difficult to see, but this looks like a path. A vehicle's probably not passing there. And certainly in close with settlements, this is the beginning of that path. If you do zoom in and look close at settlements, you'll start to see paths. But again, that's the advantage of zooming out, is that you're not going to accidentally be mapping paths as roads. So this sort of helps you filter out paths from roads. This looks like a path. This is probably a path. I don't know what this line here is. But that's the important of this section. Oh, this is great. These are excellent examples of tracks. These are tracks that are going through, this is some sort of an orchard. They're growing trees in some production scale. But you can see these roads, they don't connect to anything. They're basically just so that you can get out there. And you can see, again, I'm zoomed out a fair amount. I can still see these. So these are probably passable by vehicles and would fall under the track classification. So if we zoom in, this is, a path. You're not going to be mapping a lot of paths. Paths are really this is probably a path. This is probably a walking path. That's probably not something that a vehicle could do. But if you look, you can find paths all over if you zoom in and look closely. But there's not a ton of value. This is a path, a tiny little segment of path, but there's not a lot of value to mapping a path that's just this long. So really, you're going to want to try and identify things that you can spot zoomed out, because that's going to help you determine that this is a road and not a path. And if you find paths, we can find some paths. Let's find some paths here. Okay, so we already talked about, we saw this path before. This path is, you could map this path. It's significant. It takes them from this settlement out to whatever's going on in this field. That could be agriculture. African agriculture isn't always neat row crops like we're used to in more developed countries. So that's probably, you could map that path, but you're definitely, that might be a track, but it could also be a path, and I probably wouldn't map a path that was just that long. If the path is pretty short, if it's not really leading anywhere, like if it was a path to a river, this looks like a path. This definitely looks like a path. That doesn't look like it's passable by a vehicle. And it looks like it's specifically going to whatever, this is agriculture of some sort. But you want to shy away from paths. Zoom out. The point of this section is to encourage you to zoom out to help you classify roads. And if you're using, you can use different layers. For example, I can turn on if you have the Landsat false color imagery available, switch that on, because it'll also help you classify roads. See, now I can zoom out and I can really see. This is probably a primary, or this is probably a secondary road, and this may very well be a tertiary. This is probably a tertiary road, if not a secondary, but it goes to a major settlement, so that's a major settlement. So if we zoom in here, yeah, and you can see. So, and then in here's some residential. But what I wanted you to get out of this section is that the best way to classify roads, because we're primarily concerned with their usage and what they connect to or don't connect to, zoom out. You can't really, if you're zooming in trying to classify roads this zoomed in, you're going to have a very hard time. Path. Okay, it'll help you find a path. Again, this is a path that I probably wouldn't map because it's just not useful information. What is useful is this big road, and then we'll figure out whatever this road going off to the west is. And you can only figure that out by zooming out. Yeah, this is unclassified. That's probably an unclassified road. It's connecting small villages and hamlets primarily. Yeah, sure, at the other end there's a large settlement, but all this length, this is really probably unclassified, maybe tertiary. But what I wanted you to get out of this was zoom out. That way you won't accidentally be mapping paths as roads, and you really need to zoom out to be able to determine what the function of the road is, what sort of settlements it's connecting. So zoom out, take a look, and work from there. Zoom in to double check, but definitely zoom out when it comes time for classification. Okay, thanks very much for taking the time. Bye-bye.